Today we continue on our Sutta exploration series. This will be week number 37, I believe. And we will dip back into the Majjhima Nikāya, the middle-length discourses, and it will be the Sutta number 128, the Upakkilesa Sutta, which, by the way, is the discourse on the deceptions of the mind, or deceptions in the mind, the way I translate it. Usually it's translated as obscurations, corruptions of the mind, or mental impurities. And I find it more appropriate to use deceptions in the mind, given the nature of these Upakkilesa. They come to veil the mind. They come to veil the mind specifically of an advanced meditator, a disciple of the Dhamma, where it can be very problematic. It could be misinterpreted, the progress or the direction one is going towards. It could be adhamma, but the person might think it is dhamma. Hence the deceptive nature of these qualities that will sooner or later visit the meditator in our journeys until one becomes an arahant. Now this sutta is, you can think of it as part of, well, it's like the prequel to a sequel. What I mean by that is, a few weeks ago, I covered perhaps it was last week, I don't remember, but here in Malaysia, with a group of meditators, I explored the Chula Gosinga Sutta. And that is the latter portion of a series of events that took place, events that were triggered by a major instigating event, and that has to do with the, I hope I haven't lost you. Okay, the Wi-Fi signal went out and then it is back. Can you all hear me? Am I there with you? Okay. So
you did break up a little bit, Bhante, just so you know.
Okay. Let me just recap by a few frames then. Thank you for that, Greg. There was an event that took place, which we call it the Kosambi incident, which took place among Bhikkhus. And that started the chain of events. And this is a big event because much happened because of it. And it shook the Sangha, because this was the major event that pretty much created a schism, a division amongst the Sangha members, and the disrespect that was blatantly shown towards the Buddha himself by the Bhikkhus. So just to, if some of you are unfamiliar, I'll just mention it briefly. So there was a Vinaya master, a Vinaya Bhikkhu, a Bhikkhu who was knowledgeable in the Vinaya, which is the code of discipline for Bhikkhus. The precepts, or rules, we say. We don't say precepts in the case of Bhikkhus, just rules. Who was paid a visit by a Dhamma master, a teacher who was knowledgeable in the Dhamma. So you had these two teachers sitting together, and it so happened that the Dhamma teacher had to go and visit the bathroom. So he does, as is customary for a visiting bhikkhu, to ask the abbot where would the bathroom speak. And so is shown, and so he goes. And he returns afterwards. So, and then the Vinaya master goes to use the restroom. And then he comes back, and meanwhile, the Dhamma teacher had left. So the Vinaya master turns to some of his students, his Bhikkhu students, and he says, basically to the effect of, how could this teacher even be a Bhikkhu? Because he doesn't know the rules well. Apparently, the teacher, the Dhamma teacher, had gone to the bathroom, and there's one particular rule that says, in those days, when you're using a bucket of water, it has to be overturned. So it has to be turned upside down after the usage. So you don't leave any residue of water there, so that insects don't come and lay eggs, and so you don't perpetuate new life forms or end up causing the death of insects. So now their teacher says this, so that was like the carte blanche for these bhikkhus, the students, to go on their next pindapada, on their next alms round, to continue talking about this. And soon enough, they get into arguments because they come across the students of the other teacher, the Dhamma teacher. And they go at it, like, how could your teacher be so irresponsible? How could he be so uneducated, unrestrained, etc., etc.? So that turns into dispute, quarreling, even fighting. So, and the teacher's going at it, the students go at it, and now it just proliferates, it's just spreading. And we see basically this is basically the background of what's happening as this sutta takes place. Now, the Chula Gosinga is what happened after this sutta was given by Lord Buddha. Meaning, we're going to see Lord Buddha address the issue, and then unsuccessfully, and then he will go to meet with other students. Eventually, he will get to Anuruddha and Kimbila and Nandiya. That's where this discourse is taking place. And then he will go to do his rains retreat in seclusion by himself, at the end of which he will be asked to go back. And on the way back, he will come back to the same group of monks whom we will encounter today, as they have developed in their practice. So this is prior to that development and the instructions that Lord Buddha is giving them to address their Upakkilesas. So, so I just wanted to mention those few things before we continue. So this is the Majjhima Nikāya number 128, Upakkilesa Sutta. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One lived in Ghosita's monastery in Kosambi. It was during that time when the Bhikkhus of Kosambi had started to argue and quarrel with each other, constantly fighting and disputing while using mean and harsh words towards each other. Then a certain Bhikkhu approached the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he stood to one side and said, this is probably the rarest of occasions where I come across a sutta where a bhikkhu comes to Lord Buddha, pays an homage, and he stands. So this indicates the urgency, the human factor. So if there's a big commotion, there's the Sangha breaking up, you don't go to Lord Buddha and just in a very calm manner and just sit there, typically, and just pay your respect and then sit to one side. Usually that's how it goes, this formula. But here we see the bhikkhu stood to one side. We normally see stood to one side in reference to the devas. And because the devas usually, they don't sit, they actually would be standing. And so in this case, it was the bhikkhu standing and saying, delivering his message. So he says this, Bhante, the bhikkhus of Kosambi have started to argue and quarrel with each other, constantly fighting and disputing while using mean and harsh words towards each other. It would be great if the Blessed One would intervene by approaching those bhikkhus out of compassion. The Blessed One accepted in silence, and not long after, approaching those bhikkhus, the Blessed One said, "Bhikkhus, enough already. Give up this argument and quarreling. Enough with these verbal daggers, this usage of harsh words you keep hurling at each other. Put an end to this." When this was said, a certain bhikkhu turned to the Blessed One and said, "Bhante, you are the Lord of the Dhamma. Please do not concern yourself with this matter." This is being said by a bhikkhu to Lord Buddha himself. So do not concern yourself with this matter and stay out of this. Instead, let the Blessed One just go and dwell peacefully in happiness, here and now. Meanwhile, we will continue to dispute and argue, and if need be, continue to be seen as using harsh words against each other. This is unthinkable, but this is happening. Look at the audacity. Already from this kind of an expression, not just from any layperson, some putujjana, someone who doesn't know anything about the Dhamma, but someone who is highly ordained bhikkhu, basically. This tells you about the corruptions that had already started. And this is in the earlier days of the Vinaya. So this is, we're talking about 10, 20 years, maybe 25 years into the Sasana's life. To be able to say these words. For the second time, the Blessed One said, "Bhikkhus, enough already. Give up this argument and quarreling. Enough with these verbal daggers, this usage of harsh words you keep hurling at each other. Put an end to this." And for the second time, that bhikkhu said to the Blessed One, "Bhante, you are the Lord of the Dhamma. Please do not concern yourself with this matter and stay out of this. Instead, let the Blessed One just go and dwell peacefully in happiness here and now. Meanwhile, we will continue to dispute and argue, and if need be, continue to be seen as using harsh words against each other." In this last portion of the sentence, to be seen as using harsh words, basically their way of saying, we'll bear the brunt of this, basically. We know we're right, and if we're wrong, it's okay, we're going to be responsible for this. Well, they were not aware, but the news was spreading about this quarreling and argument throughout the lay community, which, by the way, the lay community is the lifeline, the support system for the Sangha. But the lay people don't know that this disrespectful behavior is taking place towards the Buddha, against the Buddha. For the third time, the Blessed One said, "Bhikkhus, enough already. Give up this argument and quarreling. Enough with these verbal daggers, this usage of harsh words you keep hurling at each other. Put an end to this." And for the third time, the bhikkhu turned to the Blessed One and said, "Bhante, you are the Lord of the Dhamma. Please do not concern yourself with this matter and stay out of this. Instead, let the Blessed One just go and dwell peacefully in happiness here and now. Meanwhile, we will continue to dispute and argue, and if need be, continue to be seen as using harsh words against each other." And the Blessed One became silent, turned around, and left them. Then, when it was morning, having put on his robes, and by taking his alms bowl and outer robes. So that tells us that the Lord Buddha going there was later in the day, because this is the following morning. So Lord Buddha is going to get energized by getting food from his pindapada. So the Blessed One went for the alms round in Kosambi later on his return, and after having already taken his meal, the Blessed One put his dwelling place in order, and by taking his alms bowl and outer robe, stood at the entrance of his kuti and uttered these verses. These verses are also reflected in several places, one notably in the Dhammapada, where we get more of the details, especially in the commentary to the Dhammapada verses, where we get more of the backstory which I shared with you earlier. So this is Lord Buddha standing at the entrance to his kuti, looking, you can almost see him standing and just observing. And the disappointment, you would see, perhaps. He was the enlightened ones, awakened ones, so, but nevertheless, let's see what he's saying. When so many voices are screaming at each other, none stops a moment to consider whether they are indeed being ignorant and foolish, even as they witness the Sangha being torn apart. None stops for a moment to consider whether they indeed are the ones at fault. Having completely forgotten about considerate and loving speech, these fools who are pretending to be wise obsessively keep hurling out of their unrestrained mouths words that are intended only for injuring and causing harm, without asking or realizing as to the true reasons behind. He insulted me, he hit me, he defeated me, he robbed me. Whoever lives with these begrudging thoughts, the fires of hatred in their hearts will never cease nor be extinguished. He insulted me, he hit me, he defeated me, he robbed me. Whoever does not live with these begrudging thoughts, the fires of hatred in their hearts will surely cease and be extinguished. After all, the fires of hatred could never be extinguished nor come to an end by further hatred. For they can only be extinguished and come to an end by non-hatred, adosa. This itself is an unshakably eternal law. Many do not comprehend how we have come here to live lives that are restrained, we as in the Bhikkhus. That's the purpose of the Bhikkhu, to be there, to live in a community like this where we look upon each other, ideally, as mother and father, or brother and sister. Family, that's the only family we have. We're not allowed to keep pets, dogs, cats, snakes, nagas, or anything like that. We have each other for support. We look for each other for support. That's who you have. When we get sick, we look at other bhikkhus, especially those of the bhikkhus, those of us who choose to live in the monasteries or in the forests. Because we've left behind companionship. So he's seeing all that crumble in the minds of these people, in the behavior of these people. Many do not comprehend how we have come here to live lives that are restrained, but there are those who, being wise, realize this fact and quickly settle their differences before it is too late. Those who are into breaking of others' bones, destroyers of life, who rob others' horses, cattle, and wealth, not to mention ruin an entire country, when even those come together in harmony, why shouldn't you be able to do the same? So even if murderers and killers and burglars come together to meet up, to come together in harmony, to, to divide the loot or to plan things. You don't even do that. So you're lower than them, he's saying. You have no leg to stand on, basically. If you are fortunate enough to have by your side a wise companion, a true friend who lives with faith, virtue, and wisdom, then you are safe. For by overcoming all troubles and threats, you may walk with him fearlessly and mindfully. But if you do not find yourself such a wise companion, no true friend who lives with faith, virtue, and wisdom, then, like a deposed king fleeing from his conquered realm, you may walk, much like the tusker elephant, alone in the jungle. It is much better to be living alone, for there should be no association with fools. Living and roaming about alone, one lives without any worries about doing evil, much like the tusker elephant, alone in the jungle. This says it all. He just described the life of a true bhikkhu. Not just a bhikkhu, anyone Any one of us who knows what is best for them. This is the formula to get yourself rid of any toxic relationships. Just a selective disclosure here, as we say in psychotherapy. Years ago, when I was in a toxic relationship as a layman, and as I was struggling, shall we say, to keep the relationship going despite all the abuse that was going on, including the domestic abuse and all that. But I had tried to salvage it as much as possible. Suddenly, I said, I can't do this anymore, so I have to end this. And I did, but even though I was perplexed emotionally as to whether I'm doing the right thing, I got a email notification on my phone. And it was one of the Pali verses that I've signed up in sayings that come in from the Dhammapada or Sutta Nipāta. And guess what was there in few lines, 4 lines? These: it is much better to be living alone than to associate with the fool. And that was it. That was like, thank you. The universe conspired to teach me, to help me. So what I'm trying to say with that sharing of that private piece of information, shall we say, was to help us to keep an eye or ear out when we're struggling to reach a conclusion about, when we're perplexed with our emotions and how we want the situation to unfold, when there's a lot of tanha, craving in us. That's one of the reasons why I encourage you to read the suttas, be exposed to as many suttas as possible, to the Dhamma. Because oftentimes the lessons are there, the teachings are there. Once we receive them, when we apply them, then they truly become lessons. Just some thoughts. Immediately after having uttered these words, while standing, the Blessed One began walking towards the village of Bala Kalunakara. Now, at that time, the Venerable Bhikkhu lived in that village. And on seeing the Blessed One approaching in the distance, the Venerable Bhikkhu quickly prepared a seat for him, to the Blessed One, and placed water for the washing of the feet. Then the Blessed One sat on the prepared seat and washed his feet. Afterwards, the Venerable Bhikkhu paid homage to the Blessed One and then sat to one side. Excuse me. By the way, Venerable Bhikkhu was one of the original bhikkhus who had come to take ordination. So here is a teacher who was rejected, basically, by his students, nevertheless not giving up hope on the rest of his students. So he's making a pass. He's going towards this village to check up on one of his students to see how they're progressing. And that's what we're encountering here. The Blessed One asked, Bhikkhu, are you keeping well? Are you getting your requisites met? Do you have any fatigue owing to any lack in alms food? And the Venerable Bhikkhu replied, Bhante, I am keeping well. I am getting my requisites met. I have no fatigue owing to any lack in alms food. Then the Blessed One encouragingly spoke as he inspired, roused, and lightened the Venerable Bhikkhu's heart with an enlivening talk on the Dhamma. And then he rose from his seat and left as he approached the eastern bamboo park. At that time, the Venerables Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbila were living close by within the eastern bamboo park. And by the way, the Venerables Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbila were part of the group of royals, Sakyan royals, princes, along with Devadatta, along with Venerable Ananda, and Upali was there, and there was one more. So they had gone and taken ordination, received ordination together. So these are three Sakyas, one of whom is a cousin of Lord Buddha's, Anuruddha. He is actually the half-brother of Ananda, who happens to be Venerable Anuruddha. So let's see what Lord Buddha, what happens. Now, on seeing the Blessed One coming in the distance, the forest keeper called out to him, "Recluse, do not enter this forest. There are three sons of clansmen staying here, seeking and working on their own good. Do not enter and disturb them." Well, as I was mentioning to students here when I was doing the Chula Gosinga Sutta the other day, we need to realize that over time, over centuries, we humans have a tendency to deify, to objectify a person that we hold in such high esteem, especially Lord Buddha. So when we read the words or hear the words "recluse, stay out," like we might think, like, how could he not know it's the Buddha? Well, we forget that Lord Buddha was a bhikkhu with shaved head, normal height, with robes. Just he didn't have any like as I was saying the other day, he wasn't like levitating or glowing or anything like that. It was just a bhikkhu walking. So if you're the forest keeper seeing this and you're assigned to be protecting, and this park was actually given by the king for meditating monks to practice in, given its seclusion. So we need to look at the human elements there present especially within Lord Buddha himself. We forget that. Meanwhile, the Venerable Anuruddha heard these words being spoken by the forest keeper, who was addressing the Blessed One, and he immediately called out to the forest keeper, "Forest keeper, do not stop the Blessed One. It is our teacher whom you're obstructing. He is the Blessed One." And quickly, the Venerable Anuruddha addressed the Venerables Nandiya and Kimbila. "Come, friends, Venerable ones, our teacher has arrived." And that's a surprise for them. They were not expecting, but even though they were not expecting, there's always a seat in every single cave or kuti in those days where Lord Buddha was alive, when he was alive, for just in case the Lord Buddha shows up. So sometimes they would prepare the seat just in case. So, and well, let's before I say more. Then the Venerables Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbila rushed to greet the Blessed One. As one received his bowl and outer robe, the other prepared his seat, and another brought water to the Blessed One for washing the feet. The Blessed One then sat on the prepared seat and washed his feet. Those bhikkhus then paid their respect by worshipping the Blessed One and sat to one side. Then the Blessed One addressed the Venerable Anuruddha by saying, "Anuruddha, are you keeping well? Are you getting your requisites met? Do you have any fatigue owing to any lack in alms food?" "Bhante, we are keeping well. We are getting our requisites met. We have no fatigue owing to any lack in alms food." "Very good, Anuruddha." This is where it gets interesting. Venerable Bhaggu was living alone, so Lord Buddha didn't ask the question he's about to ask, because Anuruddha is living with two other bhikkhus in close proximity. So he says, "Are you united and in harmony, amicable, considerate towards and friendly with each other, without having any disputes? Are you like milk and water, blending together? Do you look upon each other with kindly and friendly eyes?" "Bhante, we are united and in harmony, amicable, considerate towards and friendly with each other, without having any disputes. We are indeed like milk and water, blending together, looking upon each other with kindly and friendly eyes." "And how is it, Anuruddha, that you are able to live together in such harmony?" It's almost like Lord Buddha is saying, and here is the demonstration of the evidence or methodology, the technique as to how you, bhikkhus over there, need to apply yourself so you too can live united and in harmony. That's why he's asking, because he knows the answers to these. Bhante, this is how I look at it. It is truly such a great gain, such a privilege for me to live with these caring companions in the holy life. So Lord Buddha asked him, how is it that you're able to live together in such harmony? And he's saying, because I see and I consider, I reflect on the fact that it's such a privilege. It's a great fortune for me to be living with such caring human beings in the holy, and they both are on the same path. They're going towards the same goal. Intention is there. What a rare opportunity. This adds another nuance, a definition to what we understand as Kalyana Mitta. That's what we're seeing here. In this way, whether openly or in private, I live, this is Venerable Anuruddha speaking, I live while engaging in and behaving with bodily actions that are beaming with loving kindness towards these venerable ones. I live while engaging in and behaving with verbal actions that are beaming with loving kindness towards these venerable ones. I live while engaging in and behaving with mental actions that are beaming with loving kindness towards these venerable ones. So whether by body, physical action, whether by speech, whether by thoughts, I'm engaged in constantly checking and radiating metta towards these two individuals. I often reflect thus: what if I put aside the thoughts and desires I have in my own heart and just go along with the thoughts and desires of these venerable ones? What if I put my needs aside, my desires aside, and just do what they like to do? Imagine every couple did that in the world today. Imagine every family member did that today. You would put therapists out of business, by the way. Divorce lawyers, or everything. Anyhow, so I do just that and forego my own thoughts and desires and instead follow along with those of my dear companions in the holy life. Bhante, in just this manner, we find ourselves to be different in our bodies, but one in our hearts. Wow. Then both the Venerable Nandiya and the Venerable Kimbila in turn responded to the Blessed One by giving the same reply. Bhante, this is how I look at it. It is truly such a great gain. So they repeat exactly what Venerable Anuruddha just stated. And after they repeat the whole thing, they say, Bhante, in just this manner, we find ourselves to be different in our bodies, but one in our hearts. Then the Venerable Anuruddha added, Bhante, it is just in this manner that we find ourselves united and in harmony, amicable, considerate towards, and friendly with each other, without having any disputes. Therefore, we are indeed like milk and water, blending together, looking upon each other with kindly and friendly eyes. Now, do you think if you're living so closely with someone, one of you is not going to do some or have a faux pas, some mistake here and there, especially when it comes to the Vinaya rules? Most of which are just a bunch of minor rules, by the way, like the one I just mentioned earlier. But they were necessary because the crowd of bhikkhus that were coming in, it was necessary for Lord Buddha constantly to make up new rules to keep these people in check. So even with such a quality of bhikkhus, top quality bhikkhus as these three, I'm sure being human, you would make some mistakes here and there. But to put it aside and look at what is the objective that we three have, that is what sustains a cordial, unified, harmonious relationship. Excellent, Anuruddha. Excellent, Lord Buddha responds. And do you live diligently, keenly ardent, and resolute? Indeed, Bhante, we all live diligently, keenly ardent, and resolute. And how, Anuruddha, do you all live diligently, keenly ardent, and resolute? Bhante, after having gone for alms, whoever would return first from the village prepares the seats and sees to it that water for drinking and washing of the feet is available. as well as empties the trash bin. And whoever is the last to return from the village eats whatever is left over, if he so desires. And if he does not, then he throws it into a barren area where nothing grows, or puts it into some water where no life is apparent. So basically, you're not causing disruption in the ecosystem, whether by killing animals, by you tossing the food there because it might be, maybe it's too spicy, whatever, and or too oily, and there might be some animals that might suffocate because of that. So you're considerate. The same thing with the water. You're checking to see if there's any turtles or fish there. So you're avoiding these things. Then he puts away the seats, the water vessels, and after emptying and washing the trash bin, he sweeps the meal area. Furthermore, Bhante, whoever sees the water vessels used for drinking, washing, or for the toilets when running low, he would go and fill them up. And if he finds the buckets to be too heavy to carry, then he calls out to one of the others to come and help him. But he does so with a gesture of the hands. He would not utter or say a single word on account of it, because they're holding on to noble silence. We maintain noble silence during the week, except for every fifth day where we sit together throughout the night, discussing a topic on the Dhamma. So once a week is permissible. This is something that they've established. Bhante, in this manner, we all live diligently, keenly ardent, and resolute. Excellent, Anuruddha, excellent. And while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely in this manner, have you attained to any superhuman levels of knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones as a result of meditative and peacefully contented living? Bhante, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely in this manner, in our meditation, we perceive both lights and various forms. But soon after seeing them, both the lights and the forms disappear, and we do not understand as to why this is happening. This is in a major contrast to what you will see when you go over the sequel, the Chula Gosinga Sutta that I mentioned earlier, where Lord Buddha finishes his rains retreat and comes back months later, and to check on them to see how they have been progressing, given the instructions received from him before the rains, before the Vassa. And you will see how Venerable Anuruddha states how they are going through the jhanas, the first, second, third, etc., all the way to Nibbāna. So here we're seeing what was the response prior to that. So that way, so we can put this on the timeline. It helps us to see where we are historically on the timeline, based on the answers, the responses given by Venerable Anuruddha. Meanwhile, by the way, Venerable Anuruddha already had the Dibba Chakku. He had the divine eye, which, if you noticed, he's talking for the other two as well. He's saying we see lights or we don't see lights. And it's interesting because in the Chula Gosinga Sutta, they pull him aside at the end after they say goodbye to Lord Buddha. And Venerable Anuruddha declared that they all are arahants, basically. They pull him aside and they say, friend, did we ever tell you that we attained to the first jhana, second, third, all the way to Nibbāna? He says, no, friends, you didn't tell me. He says, how do you know? He says, oh, I just saw it. I knew it in my heart that you had reached it. And plus, he says, even if I didn't know it, the Devas were telling me that. So there's that. So when Venerable Anuruddha is mentioning we, he's also, so he does have Dibba Chakra. He had the divine eye long before he attained arahantship. So Anuruddha, so he's saying, but we don't understand here why the lights show up. We see shapes and forms, but why do they disappear? We don't know. Anuruddha, you must strive to understand the very cause for the disappearance of that sign. Before my awakening, while being still a seeker intent on awakening, I too would perceive both lights and various forms. But soon after seeing them, both the lights and the forms would disappear. Then it occurred to me, why did those lights and various forms disappear? What is the condition for them to be vanishing like this? So here he is narrowing down as to what was the thing, the wrench that was thrown into the engine, so to speak. What is the thing which is dislodging this? And I understood how, because he's practicing vipassana, he's trying to understand, looking, reading the set of different steps. It just didn't happen. That would be like, symptomatology, just looking at the symptomatic. No, you're looking at the cause, meaning you have to apply wisdom, Dhamma Vichaya, investigation of mind objects. Because if we have investigation of mind objects, if we understand them, Nibbāna is right there. And I understood how. It was due to the arising of doubts in me, he says. This is the first of the Upakkilesas. It was because of doubt as a condition that my collectedness and stability of mind fell away. Samadhi fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights and various forms disappeared. So you shook. That is why you fell out of that state, from seeing the lights and the forms or the shapes. It could be, in this case, when we talk about lights and shapes, we're talking about nimittas or signs. Signs would be another derivative, another form, a definition of it. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubts would cease from ever arising again. So you would push through those doubts. When you have doubts about your usually practice, the technique, where you're jumping back and forth between techniques saying, well, I used to do better with breath meditation. Why am I doing this? Or vice versa. All that comes from doubt. Doubting the teacher, doubting the Dhamma, doubting the Buddha, doubting the Sutta, doubting yourself. Usually that's the kicker, because that's what we normally have to deal with at the end of the day. Oh, I must be terrible at this. It's doubt. But we need to push through that. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely in this manner, I perceived both lights and various forms. But again, soon after seeing them, both the lights and forms would disappear. Then it occurred to me, why did they disappear? What is the condition for them to vanish like this? And I understood how. It was due to arising of inattention towards my meditation object. You've heard me many times mention yoniso manasikara. Well, I've also mentioned asati, or specifically amanasikara. Amanasikara is inattention, not paying attention. Ioniso, to clarify, oftentimes you will also see ioniso manasikara against yoniso manasikara. Ioniso manasikara is the unwise attention, meaning you're paying attention to the wrong, your attention is on the wrong thing. In this case, you have the object, but you are inattentive. There's a difference here. So he was seeing that he was not attentive enough, but especially inattention was there in him. It was because of inattention towards my meditation object as a condition that my samadhi fell away. And it was because my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt and inattention would cease from ever arising again. And here you see the first and second Upakkilesa being included here. It's almost like a mini summary. So the compilers of the suttas, we here see how they're using the upcoming sentences or small, paragraph paragraphs to summarize what just happened before, so you can recall and you repeat in your mind so that you can identify easier and easier every single time. So it's almost like a mnemonic device here that they're using, these sentence structures, because they're going to keep adding up if you're going to notice. So now there's 2 of them. Doubt and attention would cease from ever arising again. Then it's going to be 3, 4, etc. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely in this manner, I perceived both lights in various forms. But again, soon after seeing them, both the lights and forms disappeared. Then it occurred to me, why did those lights and various forms again disappear? Why did they vanish? And I understood how. It was due to the arising of laziness and drowsiness in me. Sounds familiar with meditators? And we can make all kinds of excuses. It's my DNA, it's my this, or it's my that, it's my habits, it's whatever. Or it's too strong, my sloth is too strong, or laziness. And I usually would use sloth and torpor. That is usually the formula that most people have used. But I wanted to use more relatable terms. Laziness is pretty much straight there, in your face right there. So it's unavoidably, it's powerful in its descriptive, and it's, what it's trying to say. Drowsiness, the same. It was because of laziness and drowsiness that my samadhi fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. You will never enter samadhi while having tinhamidha. That's the Pali word. Those are, it's a combination. And you're going to notice some of these were the beginnings of what we see also forming in the shape of the 5 hindrances, the pancha nibbāna. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution and to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness, and drowsiness, now they've added, would cease from ever arising again. So it's, repeating, reiterating, summarizing it so that the reader or listener can, okay, so they can recall better. Thus, while living diligently and resolutely, I perceived both lights, but soon after, again, they disappear. And then I asked, why did those, I'm paraphrasing at this point because there's more to go and I want to make the most of our time. And you have the suttas, so you can read it at your own pace later. Why did those lights in various forms again disappear? What is the condition for them to be vanishing like this? And I understood how. It was due to the arising of panic and fear in me. It was because of panic and fear that my samadhi fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. If you ever, even the state of calm, tranquility, let alone the jhana, even the first jhana, sometimes individuals who enter into a jhana, feeling that joy, they are shocked. It is perplexing. It's actually heavier than perplexing. And sometimes people can have fear, sometimes people can have panic. And especially if you go deeper and deeper and the person is tasting deeper levels, layers of upekkha, if they are not prepared before they get to the 4th jhana, they can start shaking mentally. They're afraid. And if something happens, the mind unfolds into a newer sort of experience, and that can cause panic in the mind. And that's why they fall out of the jhana, or especially the samadhi. That's why we need to establish ourselves in upekkha, really establish ourselves deeply into it before we go into deeper and deeper states in order for us to taste Nibbāna, or even the higher states of jhana. Anuruddha, imagine someone who was traveling through an unfamiliar land, and he was ambushed and attacked by murderers coming at him from both sides. Then he would be overwhelmed by both panic and fear as a result. In just the same way, I felt panic and fear arising in me. It was because of panic and fear that my collectedness and stability of mind, samadhi, fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice, by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness, drowsiness, panic, and fear, see, the list is getting longer, it's putting them all there together, would cease from ever arising again. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, resolutely, I perceived both lights in various forms. But again, soon after seeing them, both disappeared. Then it occurred to me, why did those lights in various forms again disappear? What is the condition for them to vanish? And I understood how. It was due to the arising of excitement in me. So you're not seeing here restlessness and remorse, but you're seeing excitement, which happens. And that's why many people get stuck on the first jhana. They're thinking about it, they're pondering it, and they don't go beyond it. So they need some convincing, some trusting to do, to slowly pull back and saying, it's okay, I didn't know that this load, this wave of joy was going to come crashing into my heart like this. Just like I didn't expect that, let's see what will happen next. And get off the road, just remove yourself from being an obstacle on the path. Let go of the expectation and let the pieces fall where they may. Just steady on course. And then things start to happen. So it was because of excitement that my samadhi fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Anuruddha, imagine someone who, while looking for treasure, suddenly came upon not just one entrance to a hidden treasure, but 5 entrances to 5 separate hidden treasures. Then he would be overwhelmed by excitement as a result. So there's definitely restlessness there. And that's another reason why, people don't, as I mentioned, they get stuck in any of the stages, whether it be jhanas or even the noble stages, Arya stages. In just the same way, I felt excitement arising in me. It was because of excitement that my samadhi fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness, drowsiness, panic, and fear and excitement would cease from ever arising again. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely, I perceived both lights in various forms. But again, soon after, both of them disappeared. Then it occurred to me, why did they disappear and vanish? And I understood how. It was due to the arising of inertia in me, in feeling stuck. It was because of inertia in feeling stuck that my samadhi fell away. It was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. This is when you feel like you're in a ditch. Some people say, Bhante, I'm just stuck. I can't shake it off. I can't. Maybe it's me, Bhante, or maybe, they start coming up with excuses. Well, it's just part of the process. Remember, when we talk about the Bojjhangas, you need to have vidya. It's not like vidya has to be out of the equation. It's there for a reason. You need to amplify the intensity. You need to push more with more vidya. But that requires wisdom to know exactly how much. The best example that comes to mind is when I used to feed my baby brother. At the time, he was baby, but now he's 42. He's turning 42. So I would feed him. My mom would trust me with him, and I would lay him to bed. And sometimes they would be busy, so I would feed him, but I would be making sure how much food I need to give him. Or my nieces or my nephews, I have to, you want them to eat, but you don't squeeze the whole, bottle into his mouth. The baby will die. So we know these things, it's common. But when it comes to us, it's like either one of the extremes. So when we get stuck in inertia, we say, oh, it's something to do with the technique, myself, this, that. No, you need to push. When the car gets stuck, the wheels keep spinning in the mud. Well, you get some pieces of wood, some twigs, and you put it under the tire, you step away and you hit the gas. You will push, dislodge the car out of that ditch. Same thing with us. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness, drowsiness, panic, fear, excitement, and the inertia of feeling stuck would cease from ever arising again. By the way, one of the best ways to shake yourself off of and out of inertia, which, by the way, the human population is in, given what we have been going through for the last 2.5 years, is by attending retreats. Either you do it yourself at your own home, pushing yourself out of that inertial stage, because retreats will do that. Or you could do it in a group setting, which will be your commitment. Doing something out of your routine. If you're a person who falls asleep constantly, or at least you know your time where you're going to fall asleep, and you say, sorry, that's it, my time is up, I have to go to bed, that's it. Why is that? You can bulldoze your way through that. Challenging yourself is extremely important in this path. Otherwise, you're never going to taste Nibbāna. So, one way of doing it would be saying to yourself, I determined to stay up all night. Yes, up until sunrise. And then right after sunrise, I'm going to go to bed. That commitment will take you out of the ditch, all right. But it requires energy, because you need to bring in extraordinary energy. And that's what Webu Sayadaw used to say. In order for you to taste what the ancient masters have tasted, you need to apply the same level of extraordinary energy, dedication, in order for you to taste the same things that they've tasted. That is a universal law that will never change when it comes to breaking through samsara and tasting Nibbāna supreme. So we cannot be, like lackadaisical or just like you live your normal life. No, that's mediocre compared to what is required to break through ignorance that is samsara. Because that is an extraordinary feat. You don't see arahants walking the street, like in, Manhattan. It's rare, but they're there. Why? Because they have put in the effort. They put in extraordinary effort. So that's what Lord Buddha is saying. Then, again, living diligently, I perceived both lights and various forms. But again, soon after, those forms and lights disappeared and vanished. And I understood how it was due to the arising of excessive effort in me. See, now the effort was too much. It had gone to the other side. So one side of the pendulum, and now all the way to the other. Because that's natural. So you have to gauge. And that's why we constantly practice to get to that sweet middle spot, to know exactly how much is necessary at what point. And you can't just put it in the middle and that's, okay, I'm good, take off and just, walk away from the steering wheel. No. That's why we practice sati, sampajanya, to know, to have that alertness, that wise alertness to see what's going on. So he says, it was because of excessive effort that my samadhi fell away, and it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Anuruddha, imagine someone who, while holding a quail tightly with both hands, would surely notice the quail dying right there in his hands. Squeeze the pigeon or quail too much, the dove, it dies. In just the same way, I felt excessive effort arising in me. It was because of excessive effort that my samadhi fell away. And it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Based on this newly gained information, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, so now he's repeating the whole thing. Doubt, inattention, laziness and drowsiness, panic and fear, excitement, the inertia of feeling stuck, and excessive effort would cease from ever rising again. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely in this manner, I perceived both lights in various forms. But again, soon after, they disappeared. And then I asked, what is the condition for them to be vanishing like this? And I understood. It was due to the arising of insufficient and weak effort in me. Now he's not putting any effort. It was because of insufficient and weak effort that my collectedness and stability of mind fell away. It was because of that that the lights and various forms disappeared. Anuruddha, imagine someone who, while holding a quail too loosely, so that was holding the quail too tightly, you'll kill it. And now you're holding it with so, like it's your fingers are barely there. So loosely with his hands would surely notice the quail flying right out of his hands. In just the same way, I felt insufficient and weak effort arising in me. It was because of insufficient and weak effort that my samadhi fell away. You notice this when you're sitting, especially on retreat or by yourself, every day, same time, we get bored. We think, yeah, this is it. This is the end. This is the finish line. Let's see if something like what happened 3 months ago is going to happen again. Yeah, you're just sitting there. It's like, okay. There's no enough effort. It's not even inertia, in a sense. You're not even starting the engine to get the car stuck in the ditch in the first place. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness and drowsiness, panic and fear, excitement, the inertia of feeling stuck, excessive effort, and insufficient and weak effort would cease from ever rising again. Thus, while living diligently, I perceived both lights in various forms, but again, they disappeared. And then he asked, why did they vanish? And he understood. It was due to the arising of longing in me. Longing. How come this is not happening to me? When is Nibbāna going to come and knock on my door? Ajahn Mun says, don't expect to get Nibbāna simply because you want it. You desire it. Or you ask the devas, may I attain Nibbāna? He laughs. And in fact, the devas laugh at us as well. They only will help those of us who they see are really doing the work. And they will guide us to the right teacher, to the right teaching, situations, conditions. Suddenly, the noise will go low, maybe completely, without any facilitating your awakening. Conditions would be perfect. No one would be calling you while you're sitting. Suddenly, and that's not happening just like that. So, but in this case, I don't want to digress too much in that direction, but longing. Remember, I always insist on having, it's not just me, it's in the suttas. Lord Buddha says this, chanda, the motivation has to be there. Is that desire? Absolutely. But when it becomes constantly, that becomes your focus, desire, that turns into longing. And that's dangerous because then we think that is the fuel that is necessary for Nibbāna to happen. We become like a beggar then, standing around, may I please, like, when am I going to get Nibbāna? That's longing. Pathetic. It was because of longing that my samadhi fell away, and it was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness and drowsiness, panic and fear, excitement, the inertia of feeling stuck, excessive effort, insufficient and weak effort, and longing would cease from ever arising again. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely, I perceived both lights and various forms, but again, they disappeared, and I asked, what is the condition for them to be vanishing like this? And I understood. It was due to my focusing on too many things. It was because of focusing on too many things that my samadhi fell away. It was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Sometimes we jump into memories, even things about, like, this is something that happens a lot with individuals who have studied the suttas a lot, have gathered a lot of information. They know a lot of, maybe even some sayings, some stanzas, some principles, or especially in the case of those who have looked at or even tried different techniques. This is very similar to a person who goes digging for gold. And they have a land, and and someone tells them that, I've given you that story where a person is given for a time period the keys, the authority to own a land for only a week or so, and even given the shovels and the hoe for him to dig up the gold. But in a week's time, his friend is going to come and take the land back. And he comes back and he sees that there's just these bunch of holes in the ground. And the friend is sitting there empty-handed, angry. That's what happens. When all those suttas actually don't pretty much serve anything. They don't serve you. It can boost your ego up. And too many, you get absorbed in knowing, so then it becomes an ego trip. So that is one example of focusing on too many things, instead of just digging one hole, but deep enough for you to access the gold, because it's there. It's there. And if you just follow up until this point, the Upakkilesa, if you just follow the steps that Lord Buddha is delineating, you're good. You're going to hit gold. You're going to hit oil, as they say. You're going to hit it. You're going to get to it. But we are hoarding ideas. We are hoarding of suttas, principles. Let me know a little bit of this. Let me read a little bit of that. Maybe I'm missing a line. Maybe I just need one single magic formula. I had one student who said, Bhante, could you give me that one single? I'm looking for that. And every week he would ask me the same questions, and I would answer him the same way in different forms. Same thing though. It only leaves us dissatisfied, perplexed, and maybe even resentful a little. Based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so that doubt, inattention, laziness, drowsiness, panic, and fear, excitement, the inertia of feeling stuck, excessive effort, insufficient and weak effort, longing, and focusing on too many things would cease from ever arising again. Thus, while living diligently, keenly ardent, resolutely in this manner, I perceived both lights and various forms. But again, soon after seeing them, they both disappeared and vanished. And I asked, reflected, what is the condition for them to be vanishing like this? And I understood how. It was due to becoming fixated on forms. It was because of my fixation on forms that my samadhi fell away. It was because of my samadhi falling away that the lights in various forms disappeared. Here is where we're dealing with expectations, fixations on forms. And this doesn't necessarily only pertain to when a person is experiencing a want or about to experience Nibbāna. This has a lot to do with also the jhanas. Can you hear me, all of you? Did you? Okay. I don't know why the Wi-Fi signal keeps going on and off. Fixation on forms. So that becomes a major hindrance because we have an expectation. I can just mention any of the jhanas where the mind doesn't know how it feels to experience the third jhana when you are in the second jhana. So you need a reference point, no? That is what you're trying to do. You have an expectation, you're fixated on, this is how I want. You can even think of it in terms of projections. We project, we have an anticipation of how I expect Nibbāna to look like, to be like. I didn't believe it when I first experienced the first jhana. This was not possible. I mean, who am I to experience the jhana? I mean, I'm supposed to be living in the jungles somewhere in Southeast Asia for 40 years, because that's something that I had read before. 40 years as a monk in seclusion in order for me to get close to experiencing the first jhana. And here I am living as a layman in Los Angeles. I can't possibly be having the first jhana, the experience. It's impossible. It's a fixation on some ideology which holds us back, which basically also shakes us out even from experiencing that jhana. That factor of jhana, we're going to be falling out of it. And now it's a real battle. And so long as there is that battle, you're not even going to enter any jhana or even calmness, restful state to begin with, let alone jhana. And so based on this newly gained understanding, I then made the resolution to continuously practice by paying attention in such a manner so he's now listing the whole thing. Doubt, inattention, laziness and drowsiness, panic and fear, excitement, the inertia of feeling stuck, excessive effort, insufficient and weak effort, longing, focusing on too many things, and fixation on forms would cease from ever arising again. And when, Anuruddha, I knew that having doubts is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. When I knew that inattention is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. Basically, you notice it and you walk away. You don't dwell on it. In some cases, yes, you have to do 6 R's if it is intense, if it's not letting go. But sometimes all you need to do is see it for what it is, and you just like, I see you, and just continue going. Otherwise, you don't need to engage or fight with any of these factors. When I knew that laziness and drowsiness are deceptions in the mind, I dismissed them. When I knew that panic and fear are deceptions in the mind, I dismissed them. When I knew that excitement is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. When I knew that inertia of feeling stuck is a deception, I dismissed it. When I knew that excessive effort is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. When I knew that insufficient and weak effort is a deception, I'm just abbreviating, I dismissed it. When I knew that longing is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. Some translators I see, they've listed all of them back to back, and they just use one sentence to pretty much do it. But I want to stay, as you already know, with all the translations I've done, as true to the original statements. When I knew that focusing on too many things is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. And when I knew that the fixations on forms is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. Then, Anuruddha, while living diligently, keenly ardent, and resolutely, I perceived lights, but I did not perceive any forms. And when I did see forms, I did not perceive any lights. This went on whether I meditated during the whole night, the whole day, or even during both night and day. Then I began reflecting, what is the reason or condition for this to be happening? Then it occurred to me, whenever I do not pay attention to any signs or forms, but only turn my attention to light, then I only see light, but no forms. But whenever I do not pay any attention to any signs of light, nimittas again, but only turn my attention to forms, then I only see forms, but no lights. And this goes on whether I meditate during the whole night, the whole day, or even during both night and day. Later on, Anuruddha, while living diligently, I perceived boundless lights and was able to see limited forms and shapes. Furthermore, I perceived boundless lights and was able to see limitless forms and shapes as well. This went on whether I meditated during the whole night, the whole day, or even during both night and day. Then I began reflecting, what is the reason or condition for this to be happening? Then it occurred to me, whenever my samadhi is limited in its scope, I only perceive limited lights. The samadhi has to match it. And I am able to only see limited forms. But whenever my samadhi is boundless in its scope, I perceive boundless lights and am able to see limitless forms and shapes. This goes on whether I meditate during the whole night, the whole day, or even during both night and day. At this point, Anuruddha, when I understood how having doubts is a deception in the mind, I dismissed it. When I understood how inattention is a deception, so he repeats this portion again, I dismissed it. And he goes through all of the Upakkilesas. So you're seeing there's a refinement in one's own understanding of the Upakkilesas. Don't expect them to just disappear in one shot simply because you honed in, you saw them. Because there's subtle layers at this point. Because what Lord Buddha is saying also, he's not just talking about jhanas at this point. He's also talking about Arya Savaka stage, noble stage. Because you would be experiencing these up until you become an arahant. So he's now taken us out. So earlier when we're talking about boundless and limitless, whenever we see those terms, we can also think in terms of the arupa jhanas also. Bear that in mind. So now we're seeing, therefore, another subtle layer being revealed of these deceptions in the mind, the Upakkilesas. Then I thought, now that I've given up and dismissed these deceptions in the mind, I should develop samadhi in its three aspects. Therefore, Anuruddha, I developed samadhi while supported by both thinking and pondering, meaning the first jhana. I then developed, because it has those vitakka and vichara. Those are the two qualifying factors to know if you're experiencing the joy and the other factors of jhana, and these two are there, you know for sure you're in the first jhana, not beyond. I then developed the samadhi without having any thoughts or pondering, while having joy in it. So here we are talking either about the second jhana or the third. Lord Buddha doesn't mention second or third, but based on the description, definitely it's not the first jhana. But because there's joy in it, we know it's not the fourth jhana, because we don't have that, because joy creates fluctuations and restlessness in the mind. I then developed a samadhi that is without joy, beyond pleasure and pain. When we hear that, beyond pleasure and pain, we're talking definitely about where we have an intense level of equanimity. And he says so, while having equanimity throughout, meaning the fourth jhana, at the very least. Then the knowledge and vision of the Dhamma arose in me, and I knew it in my heart. For certain, my heart's release is unshakable. This is my very last birth. There is no more rebirth for me anywhere, anymore. This is what the Blessed One said, and the Venerables Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbila were all delighted in the Blessed One's words. Sad, sad, sad. I might have sounded like I'm a bit rushing, but I wanted to make sure that I cover the whole thing. As I mentioned in the Chula Gosinga, and also in another sutta which we talked about, Anuruddha Mahavitakka Sutta, which we've covered, I think last year, beginning part of last year, earlier in the series anyhow, we see the 7 great thoughts of a superior man, which Venerable Anuruddha was having. And then Lord Buddha comes and gives him, well, Anuruddha, he says, you didn't consider this eighth great thought of a superior being. And that is the one about Nibbāna, which is the noble disciple is one who delights in the non-proliferation of thoughts, Nippapancha means you don't have papancha anymore. You don't delight in them. You don't necessarily have to have completely become free from them, but you don't enjoy them anymore. Nippapancha. You don't get delight from it. And then that's at the end, we see how he becomes an arahant after some work. And the Chula Gosinga is when he has already become an arahant, along with Venerables Nandiya and Kimbila, whom we saw. And just a few words about Venerable Anuruddha. He lived, they say, in the Theragatha, I believe, up until 150 years. And he says in his verses in the Theragatha how the last 50 of which he did not lie down to sleep. He would sleep either by sitting or not. He would just be standing or doing walking meditation. And the 30 years of the last 30 years, so the 30 years out of the 50 of his life, he only slept between in the last watch of the night, which is around, like 2 to 4 a.m., 2 to 4:35 a.m. That's when he would sleep. So, so I felt like sharing those. I will stop here, and I hope this was a sutta you also enjoyed. Any thoughts, questions, comments? These have to help us. Suttas have to help us, not become impediments, not badges, not things that we can add into the library of what we know. This is an experiential path. That's why it's called Patipada. It's a practice based. And what we're getting is constantly, Lord Buddha giving us constantly different techniques, different approaches, because you're dealing with the most sophisticated piece of deceptive machinery called the mind. And you have your past karma, vipākas, tendencies, habitual tendencies, your sankharas working against you constantly. So you have to be equipped with tools and weaponry, if you will, that you're going to be using to conquer and defeat all of these deceptive things, the Upakkilesa. You're not going to put them in a for viewing purposes in some, cabinet with glass cabinet. You're like, yeah, yes, I know what that is. Yes, I know what papanchas are. Yes, I've studied them. I've written a book on them. Who cares? Who cares? It's like that man who had gone off to a foreign land, and his parents gave their savings to him to go and study. And he comes back with, I guess, several PhDs of those days. So after traveling many, many weeks, he finally gets to the last leg of the journey where he has to cross this vast river or something, or sea. So he hires this ferryman to guide him to the other side with his boat. And as he's sitting there with his manuscripts and all the texts and things that he has collected over a decade or two, he turns to this old man who's rowing the boat while he lounges on the other side of the boat. He says, "Old man, do you know anything about mathematics?" And the man says, "No, son, I don't know what it is." He says, "There goes 25% of your life." And then after some time, he asks him, "Old man, do you know anything about astronomy?" And he says, "No, my son, I don't know what that is. I can't even spell it." And he says, "Oh, you lost another 25% of your life." Not long after that, there's a storm, thunderstorm, and there's waves, and now the boat is so shaky and it's about to topple and they're about to die. Well, they're about to, fall into the water at least. And the old man turns to this person and he says, "Son, do you know how to swim?" And he says, "No, what is that?" And he says, "There goes 100% of your life. You lost it." So he might have actually read a book on it. Who knows? But we need to know through doing, through applying. So that is my encouragement. And if there are no questions, then we'll continue next week. And we can do dedication of merits then. All right. May suffering ones be suffering free and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well. May the triple gem bless you. May your progress be what is observable by you in your daily life, not its decline. See you next week.
Thank you, Bhante.